Dads with daughters. Which was your favorite boyfriend and what made him stand out? I'm the daughter. My dad had this conversation with me the other day. We were having wine and cheese before Christmas and he was getting a little sappy, haha. We don't often talk about serious things, so it meant a ton. My dad said, you know, your mom and I are always watching. We are watching how he helps you out of the car, how when you're struggling with your back he lends a hand. We see when you fall asleep on the couch, how he scratches your head. We see him taking care of you and you taking care of him. My daughter, you are a helper and a caretaker. It is so wonderful to see that the person you chose does that too. You've dated some selfish guys in the past and your mom and I saw those guys let you struggle and not lend a hand. We are so happy to see that you found a partner. It was the one who asked for help. His parents are bad people. Mom smokes a lot of dope and I never seen her sober. I kicked the boy out my house for his issues and told him to never come back. Several months later, in the early morning hours and a colder freezing day, he knocked on my door. I opened it up and could see he left his home in a quick manner wearing nothing but pajamas and had a blanket around him. He said, I can't do my parents' bullshit anymore. I nodded for him to come in and pointed to a couch where he could sleep. There wasn't any word spoken between us. He figured out his own bullshit and moved to his sister's house out in Oregon. He became a respectable person. He at a disadvantage because his parents were shy people, but he has earned enough redemption to borrow my tools, my truck, and my respect. My daughter decided he wasn't the right one for her and moved on. The kid and I are still good friends. My dad had 4 daughters and no sons, so he was very much a sit and polish his shotgun while talking to new boyfriends type of guy. I, the youngest, had one casual date with a guy I knew from high school, but he was a year ahead, so he left the state to go to college. After a few phone calls and letters we decided to try dating long distance. Fast forward to Christmas break. Boyfriend came here home to visit family. We go out on a real date or two. Dad was away on a business trip. He came home and said he needed to meet this guy before I could go out on any more dates. Night of the meeting came and I was late coming home from work, so I ran upstairs to get ready. I came down to find the two of them sitting there watching some horrible B-rated movie and picking out all the mistakes. I asked if they even met yet. They hadn't. Apparently boyfriend walked it, greeted my dad, sat down and started asking about the movie, but did in a friendly way rather than a egotistical way. They hit it off immediately. My dad didn't even know at the time he was studying engineering. My dad was an engineer. Both parents ended up liking him so much they told me if we ever got divorced, they would disown me and adopt him, lol. Actually, not sure that was a joke. Anyway, we are still married 28 years later. I remember my daughters would bring some guy over for shock value, ear gauges, tats and the such. I would always be sure to call the young man by his first name, involve him in all conversations. I could see my daughters realize they wouldn't get the reaction they wanted. Couple days later I would ask when so and so is coming over again. They would shake their head and laugh. Both wound up with excellent partners that treat them great. One of them had ear gauges and tats, so I guess the joke's on me, lol. Both of my sisters had questionable taste in partners, but the sister I'm closest to dated a great guy in high school, just a solid responsible dude, had a plan for a career, handsome, always cheered her on, super likable. They broke up. Like many high school relationships, like nearly 20 years later, I'm bartending, and that guy walks in and thinks I'm her. He's still super nice, owns a construction business, asks after my sister. My sister is in the middle of a divorce and I eventually get her a job at the place I'm bartending at. He is so obviously all about her, but she doesn't see it. Offers to take her fishing, which he remembers was her favorite thing, with her 3 boys. Makes sure she makes it to her car every night. All that. Asks her out when her divorce is finalized, and me and my parents are like, oh my god, please go. This guy is amazing. He's also huge and muscly and gorgeous. Nope. It'd be weird. They dated when they were kids. We were all baffled. I'm still baffled. He moved to another state. She's dating another bartender. Going nowhere. Ugh. I'll answer for my dad, since he doesn't read it and his favorite is my favorite. My sister met a nice marine at a party she just happened to go to. 4 days later he heads back to Hawaii, and a short time after that deploys to Iraq. My parents had already met him. My dad even got a list of things him and the other guys in his unit would like while deployed. They often talked on the phone early in the morning and kept in contact. About 6 months into his deployment they break up. His deployment ends a couple months after that, and he comes back to Hawaii and then makes his way home to see his family. One day while visiting he calls her and says he is coming over to our house. He shows up and my sister walks down the driveway to him. They hug and they have been together ever since. He goes back to Hawaii and she went out there a few times to visit and for Marine Corps balls. His time in the Marines ends and he came to live with our family for a while before they got married. They have been married 10 years, 3 kids, 2 dogs, and things are good. He stood out because he is a nice guy, treats her well, and her previous 2 boyfriends ranged from mental abusers to physical abusers. I've read a lot of these replies, and I wonder how much people see of what goes on behind the scenes. I know which one of my exes is my parents' favorites. He was sweet, charming, and goofy, had a good job, looked after his parents, played golf with my mum. By the end of our relationship I was looking elsewhere in a means to get out because I felt so trapped. My family is aware of this. I was not looked on favorably for it, to put it lightly. This man was trying to isolate me, and I suspect also trying to get me pregnant while I was between jobs and didn't qualify for mat leave. He was so forgiving and gracious to everyone, even me, until we got home or in the car and he'd unleash his anger. He was constantly icing me out. When I didn't want to do something his way, he would grab me by the shoulder or arm so hard that it hurt and lead me around when no one was looking. He strangled me when our relationship finally blew up. I've never told my parents. Over the years they've heard bits and pieces about how controlling he could be, but I sometimes wonder if my dad thinks I'm being dramatic. I think my mother gets it now, although she still doesn't know everything that happened. Her most recent one with whom she ended things when she moved across the country. He was considerably older, but I raised her to make good decisions for herself, so that wasn't an issue. He treated her like a lady, didn't infringe upon her freedom, supported her ambitions, and didn't impose upon her time. He even came to me asking if I would mind if he helped pay a specific part of her education when she was finishing her master's degree. When they broke up, he still helped her move to Florida from OK, got her set up, and went home. Solid guy, good man. So I have a decent sized family. My father was basically the patriarch of the family as he was the oldest and most successful of the bunch, and they all would come to him for advice before he passed away, and that title has basically been bestowed upon me now, which is weird, but not the point of the post. But I know what he looked for and what I look for towards all my cousins. I'm the only male of about 20 of us. He looked for respect in the way they interacted, that the boyfriend listened to what my cousins had to say, had a job or had ambitions, and was working towards achieving those goals, and lastly had a curiosity about the world around them. I'll answer for my dad, because he doesn't have Reddit. My dad loved my boyfriend from high school. We were together almost 3 years, and he was always respectful, and they bonded over a lot of shared hobbies, since he was around the house all the time. I broke up with him when I was a senior. He was a year older than me, so he had already graduated, so we saw much less of each other, and I started dating a new guy that my dad hated. He hated it even more when I got pregnant soon after graduating high school, and he thought I was throwing my life away with this guy. Fast forward 14 years and he's a wonderful man and an amazing father, and we've been together ever since, and my dad eventually warmed up to him. My ex, however, is divorced and a deadbeat dad with an alcohol problem. I'm a son here talking about my dad and sister. I don't think he ever really liked any of her boyfriends. Her first husband was around maybe 5 years or so before they split. They did manage to have a kid during that time. This was back in the 90s when we were all living in Indiana. A couple years later it was still the 90s when she met a guy from Denmark on the internet. My sister and her friend scrimped and saved money for a vacation to France and met him there. He seemed to be a really nice guy who had a good life and career. They went home, and a few months later he came over to Indiana. Before he left they were engaged. His next trip a few months after that was when he moved here. For the life of me, I couldn't figure that one out. He had a really good life in Copenhagen and my sister was just barely getting by in Evansville, Indiana. Regardless, they chose Indiana. They got married. He adopted her first kid as his own, since Bo dad had turned into a full-blown junkie, and they had 2 more kids. He got a good job at a local financial firm and worked his way up to management over the 20+ years he worked there. Seriously, the guy was nothing but supportive of my sister their entire time together. I love my sister and all, but I still don't how she landed this guy. Last fall he passed away from cancer in his early 50s. Just about the entire time they were together my dad hated the guy and I have no idea why. He's always been a needy narcissistic who took advantage of everyone around him, and the only reason why I can think that he didn't like her husband is because it was harder for him to get money from my sister and control her when her husband came to America. My dad would still try and could usually get some, but not as much as he felt entitled to for some reason. He also plain as day said he didn't like the husband to his face because he didn't control his woman like he should have. Basically, my sister would get together with her friends at a local scrapbooking store once or twice a month and stay out later than our dad thought she should have. Because you know how women can get when they all get together. Yeah, a bunch of 50-year-old women who get together to scrapbook are really going to get up to some crazy stuff at 11 PM in small town Indiana. Woo-woo. I still remember the story of the last conversation my dad had with a man. Her husband was laying in a hospital bed dying of cancer the day before he died. My sister had to leave the room to sign some papers to get him moved over to hospice. Our dad was there, and when she left he decided it was the perfect time to convince her husband that our dad should get her husband's car. After he died, dad's car was having problems and her husband wasn't going to need it anymore, so why shouldn't they just give it to dad? Never mind that my sister was going to need all the cash she can get, since her husband who made most of their money is dying. Never mind that my sister and her husband had already told their 16-year-old son that he could have his dad's car. Nope, it should go to the guy who has always been a jerk. When he was quite firmly told no, he started again about how he wished they had never gotten married. That was their last conversation.